They say blood is thicker than water. But my family used that exact same blood to sign away my entire future, draining my life savings as easily as someone drains a bathtub. My name is Sutton, and when I was 18 years old, my own mother handed me a cardboard box and gave me a choice: surrender everything I had bled for, or freeze on the streets. I had just walked through the front door after working a brutal 14-hour double shift. My hands were blistered from scrubbing industrial fryers, my feet were aching so badly that my cheap sneakers felt like they were filled with broken glass, but I was smiling. I was genuinely smiling because I knew I was just one single paycheck away from fully funding my nursing school tuition. For years. For years of scrubbing floors, flipping burgers, taking the garbage out in the pouring rain, and sacrificing every single ounce of my teenage life had resulted in $45,000 sitting safely in a joint savings account. Or so I thought. When I opened my banking app on my phone that freezing Tuesday night, standing in the cramped hallway of my childhood home, my heart physically stopped beating for a second. The screen did not show $45,000. It showed $10. 10 single dollars and 0 cents. At first, my exhausted brain tried to rationalize it. I thought it was a system glitch. A banking error. Maybe the app had not updated. But when I walked into the kitchen, the reality of my situation crashed into me like a freight train. My mother, Blythe, was casually sipping her peppermint tea, not even looking up from her tablet. Beside her sat my older sister, Fallon, the golden child of the family, aggressively filing her nails as if she did not have a care in the world. The house smelled like expensive vanilla candles and the roasted chicken they had eaten for dinner without bothering to save me a single plate. I stood there in my greasy uniform, smelling like fry oil and bleach, my voice trembling as I demanded to know where my life savings went. My mother did not flinch. She simply reached into a folder and slid a forged bank authorization paper across the marble kitchen island. She did not apologize. She did not cry. She did not even have the decency to look guilty. She just looked me dead in the eyes, took another slow sip of her tea, and delivered a sentence that still haunts my nightmares to this day. She said, "Fallon is fragile, Sutton. She cannot handle the stress of credit card debt and losing her car. But you are tough. You will survive. You will figure it out." In that exact moment, the air left my lungs. I realized I was never a daughter to them. I was just a walking ATM. A financial backup plan to fund my sister's delusions of grandeur. I walked away that night with exactly $10 to my name. It was the ultimate betrayal. But what my mother did not realize as she watched me walk out into the snow was that her cruelty was forging a weapon. A weapon that, exactly 5 years later, would tear their fake perfect world apart piece by piece. To really grasp the absolute insanity of that night, you need to understand the dynamic in that kitchen. The bank account was a joint account because I had opened it when I was 15, meaning my father, Evander, had his name on it. He was the one who had to authorize the massive wire transfer. I looked past the marble island, past my mother's smug face, and saw my dad sitting in the living room. The television was glowing brightly. He had the remote in his hand. When I screamed his name, begging him to explain why he let them steal my entire future, he did not even turn his head. He just pressed the volume button up. He literally turned up the television to drown out the sound of his youngest daughter sobbing. Fallon finally stopped filing her nails and sighed loudly, like my devastation was just an annoying background noise ruining her evening. She looked at me with this pathetic, fake sympathy and said I really needed that money, Sutton. The bank was going to repossess my Audi. You know I need a reliable car for my brand deals. Her brand deals consisted of posting heavily edited photos on social media for free detox teas that nobody bought. For that imaginary career, she felt entirely entitled to the money I had earned cleaning toilets and dealing with angry customers for 4 long years. I turned back to Blythe. I asked her how she could do this. I told her that money was my nursing school tuition, my way out, my entire life plan. I had worked 80-hour weeks during summer vacations while Fallon was partying in Miami on my parents' credit cards. Blythe just took another sip of her tea. She set the mug down gently on a coaster, folded her hands, and looked at me as if I were a misbehaving toddler. "You are being dramatic, Sutton," she said, her voice smooth and cold. "We are family. Family helps family." Fallon made some minor financial miscalculations, and as her sister, it is your duty to help her. Besides, you're smart. You can just take out student loans. You always figure things out. You are the resilient one. The resilient one. The tough one. Those were just words they used to justify treating me like garbage. Being the strong one in my family did not mean I got respect. It meant I got to carry everyone else's burdens. It meant my boundaries were invisible and my pain did not matter. I looked at the three of them. The mother who orchestrated the theft, the sister who benefited from it, and the father who cowardly allowed it. A strange, terrifying calm washed over me. The tears abruptly stopped. I did not yell. I did not throw things. I slowly reached into my pocket, took my house key off my keychain, and placed it on top of the forged bank document. "If my money belongs to Fallon," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "then I guess I do not belong here." Blythe scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Stop throwing a tantrum. If you walk out that door over some money, do not bother coming back." I went in my room, grabbed a small cardboard box from the closet, and threw in 3 changes of clothes, my toothbrush, and my essential documents. That was it. 18 years of my life fit into one tiny, pathetic box. I walked back through the kitchen. Nobody stopped me. Nobody said a word. The only sound was the laugh track from the sitcom my dad was watching. I stepped out into the freezing November night with $10 in my pocket and a hole in my chest where my heart used to be. That first night, I slept in the front seat of a beat-up Honda Civic I had bought for $800 a year prior. The heater was broken, blowing nothing but icy air into my face. I parked under a flickering, buzzing street lamp at the far end of a 24-hour grocery store parking lot. I wrapped myself in my greasy work jacket, shivering uncontrollably, clutching the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. As the frost built up on the windshield, isolating me from the rest of the world, my mind started playing a highlight reel of my life. A museum of painful memories, displaying every red flag I had ignored because I desperately wanted to believe my family loved me. The first exhibit in my mental museum was my 16th birthday. I had spent the entire month prior helping Blythe plan a massive yacht party for Fallon's 19th birthday. Fallon got a towering 3-tiered cake, a live DJ, and a designer handbag that cost more than my entire wardrobe. 3 months later, when I turned 16, I came home from school to a completely empty house. There was no cake. There were no presents. There was no singing. Blythe had left a casual sticky note on the fridge saying she and Fallon went out for a luxury spa day to relieve Fallon's stress from her college classes. I walked 2 miles to the corner store, bought a stale vanilla cupcake with the loose change at the bottom of my backpack, and sat on the curb outside my dark house, singing happy birthday to myself while the streetlights flickered above me. Then came the memory of my senior year. I was a straight-A student, fighting tooth and nail for a full-ride scholarship to a prestigious pre-med program. I had spent 6 grueling weeks writing the perfect admission essay. It was my masterpiece, my golden ticket out of that toxic household. The night before it was due, I left it printed on the home office desk to dry. The next morning, it was gone. I tore the house apart looking for it. I finally found it in the kitchen trash can, torn into dozens of tiny, unreadable pieces. Fallon was sitting at the kitchen table, applying lip gloss in a compact mirror. When I confronted her, screaming through my tears, she casually mentioned that she needed scratch paper to test her new pens and didn't realize it was my stupid essay. But she knew. I saw the jealous gleam in her eyes. She was failing her community college classes, facing academic probation, and the thought of her younger sister succeeding where she failed was a massive threat to her golden child status. She had to destroy my hard work to maintain the hierarchy. And my mother? My mother told me to stop crying over spilled milk and just type it out again, as if I had another 6 weeks to spare before the midnight deadline. And then there was my father, Evander, the quiet enabler. For years, I tried to make excuses for him. I told myself he was just non-confrontational, that he was a victim of Blythe's dominating personality too. But as I sat freezing in my car, the brutal truth hit me. Doing nothing is an active choice. When Blythe would violently berate me for not doing Fallon's laundry, Evander would suddenly find the daily newspaper incredibly fascinating. When Fallon blamed me for breaking a vase she clearly dropped while drunk, Evander would just sigh, hand me a broom, and tell me to clean it up to keep the peace. He chose his own comfort over my safety every single time. He wasn't a victim. He was an accomplice. He was the one who signed the banking papers to give my money away. The $10 bill sat on the passenger seat, mocking me in the dim light. $45,000 vanished into thin air to pay off designer shoes, fancy dinners, and a luxury car Fallon could not afford. My blood boiled. The sadness evaporated, completely replaced by a deep, dark rage. They did not just steal my money. They stole my safety net. They stole my time. They threw me away because I stopped being a useful tool to them. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were red and swollen, but my jaw was set like stone. They thought I would come crawling back. They thought a few nights in the freezing cold would break me, force me to return and apologize for being angry about the theft. They thought the tough girl routine was just a phase. But they were profoundly wrong. I made a promise to myself right there in that frozen car. I would build a kingdom they could never enter. I would become so successful, so untouchable, that they would look at me and choke on their own regret. Have you ever felt the cold reality of knowing the people who were supposed to protect you are the ones who destroyed you? Tell me about your moments of realization in the comments. The next 5 years were an absolute masterclass in survival. I did not just survive, I clawed my way out of the dirt with my bare, bloody hands. When you have absolutely nothing to fall back on, when you know that failing means dying on the streets, you learn exactly what you are capable of. The first few months were the hardest, a blur of exhaustion and relentless hunger. I showered at a cheap public gym at 4 in the morning, rotating between 3 different sets of clothes that I washed in the bathroom sink. I lived on instant ramen noodles, peanut butter sandwiches, and whatever leftover fries the diner cooks let me take home. I worked the morning shift at a diner serving pancakes to truck drivers, the evening shift at a retail clothing store folding shirts, and the graveyard shift stocking heavy boxes at a warehouse. Sleep was a luxury I simply could not afford. Despite the crushing schedule, I enrolled in a community college nursing program, paying out of pocket, dollar by dollar, paycheck by paycheck. I studied pharmacology under the dim dome light of my car until the battery died. I practiced inserting IVs on pieces of fruit during my 15-minute lunch breaks behind the warehouse. There were days when I was so exhausted I hallucinated shadows moving in the corners of my eyes, days when the hunger gnawed at my stomach so fiercely I thought I would pass out right there on the retail floor. But every time I felt like giving up, I pictured my mother sipping her peppermint tea, telling me I was tough and I would figure it out. Spite is a highly flammable fuel. It kept my engine running when the gas tank was completely empty. My turning point came during my clinical rotations in my 3rd year. I was assigned to a pediatric intensive care unit. It was grueling, heartbreaking work, watching tiny bodies fight for their lives, but I loved it with every fiber of my being. The head nurse of the unit was a fierce, middle-aged woman named Cressida. She had eyes like a hawk, a no-nonsense attitude that terrified the new residents, and a heart of pure gold that she hid behind a very strict exterior. One evening, after a particularly brutal 12-hour shift where we had coded 2 patients, I went back to the staff locker room. I had not eaten a proper meal in 2 days because my car needed a new alternator, and I had spent my entire grocery budget fixing it so I wouldn't lose my jobs. I sat down on the wooden bench, bent over to tie my shoelaces, and then everything just went black. I woke up on a cot in the break room. Cressida was standing over me, her arms crossed, holding a carton of orange juice and a massive turkey sandwich. She didn't yell. She didn't ask silly questions about whether I was dieting. She just looked at my worn-out shoes, the dark circles under my eyes, my dangerously thin frame, and said, "Eat. Then you are going to tell me exactly where you sleep at night, because nobody who sleeps in a real bed collapses like a folding chair." I broke down. For the first time in 3 years, I cried. I told her everything. About the $45,000, the forged signature, the cardboard box, the Honda Civic, and the cold nights in the parking lot. Cressida listened in absolute silence, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she reached into her pocket and handed me a set of brass keys. She had a renovated storage suite above her detached garage. She told me I could stay there rent-free, as long as I kept my grades up and promised to become the best damn pediatric nurse her floor had ever seen. Cressida became the mother I never had. She did not coddle me, but she protected me. She gave me a safe place to finally close my eyes and breathe without fear. 2 years later, I graduated at the very top of my nursing class. I passed my state licensing exam on the first try with flying colors. Cressida immediately hired me on as a full-time pediatric ICU nurse. By the time I turned 23, my life looked entirely different from the scared teenager in the freezing car. I was making $125,000 a year. I bought a beautiful 3-bedroom house in a quiet, safe, tree-lined suburb. I had a reliable new SUV, a fully funded retirement account, and a pantry that was never empty. I had built an impenetrable fortress. During those 5 years, my family never reached out. Not a single phone call, not a text message, not an email, not a letter. They did not check to see if I was alive, if I had frozen to death, or if I had starved. To them, Sutton was dead and buried. And, honestly, I preferred it that way. I had legally changed my phone number to sever the ties, but kept my old email address active just for junk mail and old subscriptions. Then, on a random Tuesday evening, exactly 5 years to the week since they kicked me out with $10, I was sitting on my plush velvet sofa, drinking a glass of expensive red wine when my new phone vibrated. I had synced my old cloud contacts years ago and never bothered to delete them. The name flashing aggressively on the screen made the blood in my veins run ice cold. It said Blythe. I stared at it. 5 years of absolute, deafening silence, and now she was calling. My first instinct was to block the number and throw the phone across the room. But curiosity is a dangerous, compelling thing. I swiped right and pressed the cold phone to my ear. I didn't say hello. I just breathed. Blythe's voice came through the speaker, but it was not the cold, arrogant, commanding tone I remembered from the kitchen. She was sobbing. Hysterically. "Sutton, oh my God, Sutton, please," she wailed into the receiver. I sat up straight, placing my wine glass on the coffee table. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice as steady and cold as a winter morning. She did not ask how I was. She did not ask where I lived. She did not apologize for stealing my money or throwing me away. The very first words out of her mouth were, "Sutton, your sister needs you." I almost laughed. I truly did. Half a decade later, and absolutely nothing had changed in their twisted dynamic. What kind of catastrophic mess has the golden child gotten into this time? I wondered. I did not rush over to their house. The old Sutton, the desperate 18-year-old who craved their validation and love, would have dropped everything, grabbed her coat, and driven through a hurricane to help. The 23-year-old Sutton, the hardened trauma nurse who dealt with life and death and grieving families every single day, just took another slow sip of her wine. "Tell me exactly what is going on, Blythe, and skip the dramatic crying." "It doesn't work on me anymore," I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion. She choked back her fake sobs, clearly taken aback by my coldness. "It is Romy," she said, her voice shaking. "Child Protective Services took Romy. They are trying to take her away from Fallon. We need you to come here right now." Romy was Fallon's daughter. My niece. She was 6 years old now. I had only met her a few times when she was a baby, right before I was thrown out. The thought of a 6-year-old girl in the custody of the state system made my chest tighten with genuine concern, but my internal alarm bells were ringing loudly. Why would Child Protective Services forcefully remove a child from a home unless something horrific had happened? They don't just take kids away for no reason. I told Blythe I would look into it, and hung up the phone before she could launch into another manipulative tirade. I did not trust a single syllable that came out of my mother's mouth. Working in the pediatric emergency room, you make critical connections. You get to know the local law enforcement officers, the social workers, and the paramedics who bring in abused and neglected kids. I picked up my phone and called a police officer friend of mine, a guy named Marcus, who worked in the precinct near my parents' house. I asked him if he could quietly pull the public incident report for Fallon's address. 10 minutes later, Marcus called me back. The truth he told me made me physically sick to my stomach. Fallon had started dating a guy named Magnus. Magnus was a flashy, loudmouth degenerate who fancied himself a professional gambler, though he was mostly just a professional loser with a bad temper. That weekend, Fallon and Magnus decided they desperately needed a romantic vacation. So, they drove to a luxury casino resort 3 hours away across state lines. The horrific part? They did not hire a babysitter. They did not drop Romy off at Blythe's house. Fallon simply locked the front door of her apartment and left her 6-year-old daughter completely alone for 16 grueling hours. The police report stated that Romy had gotten hungry around 9 at night. She dragged a heavy wooden dining chair to the kitchen counter, found a plastic bowl, put dry ramen noodles in it without adding water, and put it in the microwave for 10 minutes. The dry noodles caught fire. Thick black smoke filled the apartment. The smoke detectors went off, alerting the downstairs neighbors, who frantically called the fire department. The firefighters had to break down the door with an axe and found Romy hiding under her bed, terrified, coughing, and inhaling toxic smoke. When the police finally tracked Fallon down at the casino, she was heavily intoxicated, screaming at a blackjack dealer. To make matters infinitely worse, when they searched Magnus' car in the casino parking lot, they found a substantial amount of illegal narcotics hidden in the trunk. Fallon was arrested on the spot for felony child endangerment. Child Protective Services immediately took emergency custody of Romy, placing her in a temporary holding facility. This was the fragile sister my mother had sacrificed my entire future for. A woman who would leave her tiny, helpless daughter in a dark apartment to go gamble and do drugs with a degenerate. My blood was not just boiling, it was turning into superheated steam. They did not call me because they missed me. They called me because Fallon was facing serious prison time, and they needed a miracle to stop the state from putting Romy into the foster care system permanently. And I knew exactly what they wanted. They needed someone with a spotless criminal record. Someone with a stable, highly respectable career in the medical field. Someone with a safe, clean, spacious home. They needed a pediatric nurse. They needed the exact life I had built with the hands they tried to break. The irony was so incredibly thick you could cut it with a surgical scalpel. I was holding all the cards now. And I was going to make them play my game, by my rules. I sent Blythe a short text message the next morning. Meet me at the coffee shop downtown at noon. Bring Fallon. When I walked into the upscale cafe, I spotted them immediately. You would logically think a mother facing the permanent loss of her child and a grandmother terrified of the state foster system would look devastated, tired, and desperate. But no. Blythe was wearing a tailored cashmere coat, her hair perfectly styled. Fallon was hiding her hungover eyes behind massive designer sunglasses, clutching a $600 leather handbag. The exact type of handbag my stolen tuition money probably paid for years ago. I walked over and sat down across from them. I did not order anything. I did not say hello. I just sat there and stared at them, letting the uncomfortable silence stretch until Fallon shifted nervously in her seat. Fallon finally took off her sunglasses. She looked annoyed, not apologetic. Sutton, finally. Look, this whole thing is a massive misunderstanding. The police blew it way out of proportion to hit a quota. I just ran out for a few hours to get a break, and Romy was supposed to be asleep in bed. A few hours? I raised an eyebrow, keeping my voice deadpan. The police report said 16 hours, Fallon. You were 3 hours away at a casino while your daughter almost burned your apartment to the ground trying to feed herself. Blythe waved her hand dismissively, leaning forward and lowering her voice so the neighboring tables wouldn't hear. Let us not get bogged down in the dramatic technicalities, Sutton. The point is, the social workers are being extremely difficult and unreasonable. They're threatening to put Romy in foster care unless a suitable family member steps up to take temporary custody immediately. Evander and I cannot do it because our house does not pass the strict state safety inspection, and Evander has that old DUI on his record that flags him in the system. She paused, looking at me with a sickeningly sweet smile. The smile of a venomous spider inviting a fly into its web. But you, Sutton, you are a pediatric nurse. We did some checking online. We know you bought a nice house in the suburbs. You have the perfect profile. You are exactly what the judge wants to see. I leaned back, crossing my arms over my chest. So you want me to take custody of Romy? Fallon rolled her eyes, sighing loudly as if I was being incredibly slow. Just on paper, Sutton. Obviously. You sign the guardianship forms, the social workers back off, and once the case is officially closed and the heat dies down, Romy comes back to live with me and Mom. It is just a legal formality. You have a big house, just let her sleep there when the social worker visits for the random inspections. Sign your name. Don't make this a big deal. I sat there, listening to the devil eagerly read her script. They wanted to use my hard-earned credibility as a disposable shield for their absolute negligence. They wanted to use my clean background check to actively trick the state, putting a traumatized child right back into a dangerous, toxic environment the second nobody was looking. They still viewed me as a tool, an object to be utilized whenever Fallon messed up her life. I looked at Fallon's expensive manicured nails. I looked at Blythe's pristine coat. They had learned absolutely nothing in 5 years. They had no remorse. They truly believed I was stupid enough to risk my nursing license, my freedom, and my morals to save them from the legal consequences of their own horrific actions. The rage inside me crystallized into something sharp, precise, and deadly. I could have screamed at them. I could have thrown my glass of ice water in their faces and walked out. But I am not my mother, and I am not my sister. I am strategic. I smiled. A slow, chilling smile that they immediately mistook for compliance. Okay, I said softly. I will help the family. Blythe let out a massive sigh of relief, reaching across the table to grab my hand. I swiftly pulled my hand away before she could make contact. I knew we could count on you, Sutton. You always were the tough one, willing to help the family when it mattered. But, I continued, cutting her off sharply, I need to meet Romy first. I need her to spend this weekend at my house to see if she is comfortable. I cannot just sign legal custody papers without assessing the child's mental state. My license requires me to do things by the book. Fallon rolled her eyes again, picking up her sunglasses. Fine, whatever. The social worker is keeping her at a temporary placement facility right now. Tell them you are initiating the family transfer protocol. Just get it done quickly so I can get back to my life. I stood up, pushing my chair back. I will arrange it. I turned and walked out of the coffee shop, the bell above the door ringing behind me. They thought they had won. They thought they had successfully manipulated the scapegoat once again to clean up their mess. But what they did not know was that I had absolutely no intention of doing a fake adoption. I was going to take Romy. Legally, permanently, and completely. I contacted the assigned CPS caseworker that exact same afternoon. I identified myself as the maternal aunt, a fully licensed pediatric ICU nurse, and requested an emergency weekend visitation to establish a bond. Because of my pristine credentials and medical background, the background check flew through the state system in record time. By Friday evening, a tired-looking social worker dropped a tiny, frail 6-year-old girl off at my front porch. Romy looked exactly like I did at that age. Big, cautious brown eyes, messy hair, and shoulders that were perpetually hunched forward, as if she was always waiting for a heavy blow to land. She stood on my porch holding a small, flimsy plastic grocery bag containing 2 cheap, oversized t-shirts. That was all the temporary facility had given her. Hi, Romy, I said, kneeling down to her eye level so I wouldn't tower over her. I'm your Aunt Sutton. She did not smile. She just nodded slowly, her eyes darting around my brightly lit living room, taking in the warm fireplace, the soft rugs, and the large television. It was a stark, jarring contrast to whatever chaotic, loud environment Fallon had provided. The first 24 hours were absolutely heartbreaking. Romy moved through my house like a ghost trying not to be seen. She asked permission to sit on the sofa. She asked permission to use the bathroom. When I made her macaroni and cheese for dinner, she ate it so fast she almost choked, constantly looking around as if someone was going to snatch the bowl away from her at any second. The breaking point happened on Saturday afternoon. I had bought her a cup of hot chocolate, putting it in a hard plastic cup just to be safe. I handed it to her while she was sitting on a stool at the kitchen island. Her small, trembling hands slipped, and the cup crashed to the hardwood floor, spilling brown liquid everywhere. The reaction was instantaneous and horrifying. Romy did not just cry. She let out a gasp of pure, unfiltered terror, dropped to her knees, and scrambled to curl herself into a tight little ball against the kitchen cabinets. She threw her skinny arms over her head, violently shielding her face. I'm sorry, please don't hit me, I'm sorry. She shrieked, her tiny body shaking uncontrollably. I froze. My heart shattered into a million jagged pieces, piercing my chest. I slowly lowered myself to the floor, sitting a few feet away from her so I wouldn't crowd her space or make her feel trapped. Romy, look at me, I said softly, keeping my tone as gentle as humanly possible. She peeked out from between her arms, hot tears streaming down her pale cheeks. It is just a cup, sweetie, I said, smiling warmly. It is plastic. It didn't even break. And even if it did, accidents happen. We just clean it up. Watch. I grabbed a roll of paper towels and began slowly wiping up the hot chocolate. I did not sigh. I did not show a single ounce of frustration. I just cleaned it up methodically. When I finished, I tossed the paper towels in the trash and sat back down on the floor. See? All gone. Nobody is angry. Nobody is going to hit you. Ever. Not in this house. She slowly uncurled her body, staring at me like I was a magical creature from another planet. My mom screams when I drop things, she whispered, her voice trembling. Magnus throws things at the wall when he is mad. My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth would crack, but I maintained the warm smile for her. Well, in this house, we don't scream over spilled milk. Or hot chocolate. We just clean it up and make a new one. Later that evening, after I had drawn her a warm bubble bath and put her in a brand new pair of soft fleece pajamas I had bought her, I went into the guest bedroom to organize her meager belongings. I bent down to push an empty laundry basket under the bed, and my hand brushed against something strange in the dark corner. I pulled it out. It was a small, faded pink Hello Kitty backpack. It was not the plastic grocery bag she arrived with. She must have hidden this inside the plastic bag when the social worker picked her up from the facility, terrified they would take it away. I carefully unzipped the main compartment. Inside, neatly folded, were a pair of worn-out socks, a single long-sleeve shirt, a half-eaten pack of dry crackers wrapped in a napkin, and a tiny, battered stuffed rabbit missing one eye. I carried the backpack into the living room where Romy was watching cartoons on the couch. Romy, what is this? I asked gently, sitting next to her. She looked at the backpack, and her face went completely blank. Her eyes dropped to the floor, and she started twisting her fingers together. It is my emergency bag, she mumbled. Your emergency bag? I asked, feeling a cold dread wash over me. What is the emergency for? She twisted her fingers harder, looking so small and defeated. Sometimes Mommy forgets to come home. Or she leaves me at strange houses with people I don't know who yell a lot. I keep it packed so if I have to run away, or if I get left somewhere for a long time, I don't starve. I have my crackers. I always keep my crackers. The air violently left my lungs. I could not breathe. I was staring at a 6-year-old child who had packed a survival bag because she knew with absolute certainty that her mother would not protect her. The room started spinning. The image of the pink Hello Kitty backpack blurred, and suddenly, I was 18 years old again, standing in the freezing snow, holding a cardboard box with my life packed inside it, having just lost everything. The universe has a deeply twisted sense of humor. The toxic cycle was repeating itself right in front of my eyes. Blythe had sacrificed me to protect Fallon's ego. And now, Fallon was sacrificing Romy to protect her own selfish desires and addictions. I looked at my niece. I saw the deep, paralyzing fear in her eyes, the exact same fear I had lived with my entire childhood. In that split second, the plan changed entirely. I wasn't going to play Blythe's game. I wasn't going to sign temporary papers and hand this beautiful, traumatized child back to the monsters who broke her. I was going to burn their world down. I knelt down in front of Romy and took her small hands in mine. "Romy," I said, my voice thick with emotion but firmer than iron. "You are never, ever going to need this emergency bag again. I promise you on my life. You are safe now." She looked at me, a tiny flicker of hope shining in her exhausted eyes. I walked into my home office, locked the door, and opened my laptop. I did not call Blythe to tell her the weekend was going well. I called my lawyer. I told him I needed to draft an emergency petition for full legal and physical custody, completely bypassing the family reunification program. I was going to declare Fallon an unfit mother, and I was going to use every single resource, every single dollar, and every shred of evidence I had to obliterate them in family court. The war had officially begun. If you are watching this and you feel your blood boiling at what my family did to this innocent little girl, hit the like button right now. Because the revenge I executed next didn't just break their hearts, it destroyed their entire reality. Stick around, because the fireworks are just getting started. The hardest part about dealing with toxic people is learning how to speak their language without letting it poison your own soul. For the next 2 weeks, I became the perfect, obedient daughter they always demanded I be. I played the role of the Trojan horse flawlessly. I texted Blythe every single day with updates that were entirely fabricated to keep her comfortable and unsuspecting. I told her the social workers were doing routine background checks and that the paperwork for temporary guardianship was moving along smoothly. I even let her believe that I was stressed about the heavy responsibility, which fed right into her twisted ego. She loved thinking I was struggling while doing her dirty work. While Blythe and Fallon were busy shopping for new outfits for their triumphant return to the social scene, I was busy building an airtight legal case that would ensure they never saw Romy again. I did not hire just any lawyer. I used a significant portion of my savings to retain the most aggressive, ruthless family law attorney in the city, a woman named Ms. Sterling who had a fierce reputation for destroying negligent parents in court. I sat in Ms. Sterling's pristine office, overlooking the downtown skyline, and laid out my entire life on her mahogany desk. I gave her the police reports from the casino incident. I gave her my tax returns, my pay stubs showing my $125,000 salary, and the deed to my 3-bedroom home. I handed her a glowing letter of recommendation from Cressida, detailing my impeccable character and my unwavering dedication as a pediatric trauma nurse. But I did not stop there. I also handed Ms. Sterling the bank statements from 5 years ago. The exact records showing the transfer of $45,000 from my account to Fallon's, authorized by my father. Ms. Sterling looked at the documents, pushed her glasses up her nose, and smiled a very dangerous smile. She told me that while the theft was past the statute of limitations for criminal charges, it was a profound piece of character evidence. It proved a documented history of the family sacrificing my well-being to cover for Fallon's reckless behavior. It established a pattern of financial exploitation that any family court judge would find deeply disturbing. As my legal trap was being set, the flying monkeys began to circle. In toxic families, the flying monkeys are the extended relatives who are manipulated by the abusers to pressure the scapegoat into compliance. My phone started ringing with numbers I had not seen in years. First, it was my Aunt Carol. Then, my Uncle Dave. People who had not bothered to call me when I was 18 and sleeping in a freezing car were suddenly very concerned about my family loyalty. Aunt Carol left a venomous voicemail. "Sutton, your mother is sick with worry. Stop dragging your feet with this paperwork. You have a nice house, just sign the forms and give Romy back to your sister when the dust settles. Stop being so selfish and remember where you came from. Family is everything." I did not delete that voicemail. I saved it. In fact, I downloaded a call recording application and answered the next time Uncle Dave called. He spent 15 minutes screaming at me, telling me I was an ungrateful brat who owed my parents for raising me, and that taking Romy permanently would destroy Fallon's fragile mental health. I let him yell. I let him threaten me. I just sat at my kitchen island, sipping tea, and said, "Thank you for your input, Uncle Dave." Then I handed the audio files directly to Ms. Sterling. Every threat, every demand, every attempt at emotional blackmail was documented and added to the growing file. They were handing me the exact ammunition I needed to prove that the entire extended family was complicit in Fallon's toxic ecosystem. Romy was not just in danger from her mother, she was in danger from a whole network of enablers who viewed her as an inconvenience rather than a vulnerable child. Meanwhile, Romy was blossoming in my home. The deep fear in her eyes was slowly starting to recede. We baked cookies together without anyone screaming about the flour spilled on the counter. We went to the park, and I pushed her on the swings for hours until we were both laughing. One evening, as I was tucking her into bed, she looked up at me and asked if she had to pack her pink emergency backpack for the weekend. My heart ached, but I smiled and told her no. I told her the only thing she needed to pack for the weekend was her imagination, because we were going to build a massive blanket fort in the living room. Seeing her tiny shoulders relax, seeing her finally realize that she did not have to live in a state of constant survival, cemented my resolve. I was going to walk into the caseworker's office and drop a bomb that would shatter Blythe and Fallon's reality forever. But what would their reaction be when they realized the scapegoat was now the one holding the executioner's axe? The official case review meeting was scheduled for a rainy Tuesday morning at the Department of Child and Family Services. The building was sterile, smelling faintly of cheap bleach and stale coffee, with flickering fluorescent lights that gave everything a sickly yellow hue. I arrived early, dressed in a sharp, conservative navy suit, with Ms. Sterling walking beside me carrying a leather briefcase thick enough to stop a bullet. When Blythe and Fallon finally strolled into the waiting room, 20 minutes late, they looked like they were arriving at a casual brunch date rather than a custody hearing for an endangered child. Fallon was wearing a designer trench coat, typing furiously on her phone, while Blythe carried a cup of expensive artisanal coffee. When Blythe saw me sitting on the hard plastic chair, she smiled that fake, sugary smile and strutted over. "Sutton, darling," she cooed, reaching out to fix the collar of my suit. "You look so tense." "Don't worry, the lawyer we spoke to said this is just a formality. You sign the papers, say you are taking Romy in as a foster placement, and we can all go home and put this ugly mess behind us." I stepped back, out of her reach. I did not say a word. I just stared at her. Miss Sterling introduced herself simply as my legal counsel, which caused Blythe's smile to falter for a fraction of a second, but her sheer arrogance quickly masked her confusion. We were called into a small, windowless conference room. Sitting at the head of the long wooden table was the senior caseworker, a stern-looking man named Mr. Harrison, along with a state-appointed advocate for Romy. Blythe took a seat, crossed her legs, and immediately started her grand performance. She talked about how much they loved Romy, how the casino incident was an isolated mistake, and how grateful they were that Sutton was stepping up to facilitate the temporary family placement. Fallon chimed in, sighing dramatically and wiping a non-existent tear. "I am just a single mother trying to do my best in a hard world. The police were targeting Magnus, and I got caught in the crossfire. Romy belongs with me. Sutton is going to hold on to her for a few weeks until my apartment is cleared by the state, and then things will go right back to normal." Mr. Harrison listened quietly, making notes on his yellow legal pad. When Fallon finished her practiced monologue, Mr. Harrison looked up, adjusted his glasses, and turned directly to me. "Miss Myers, we have reviewed the temporary placement forms you submitted last week. However, we also received a secondary filing from your attorney this morning." Blythe frowned, looking back and forth between me and the caseworker. "Secondary filing? What is he talking about, Sutton?" I sat perfectly straight in my chair, folding my hands on the table. I did not look at Blythe. I kept my eyes locked on Mr. Harrison. Miss Sterling opened her briefcase and handed a thick stack of bound documents to the caseworker. "Mr. Harrison, my client is not here to facilitate a temporary placement," Miss Sterling said, her voice echoing in the quiet room like a gunshot. "We have filed an emergency petition for sole physical and legal custody of Romy. Furthermore, we are filing a formal declaration declaring Fallon unfit for parental duties, and we are requesting an immediate restraining order preventing both Fallon and Blythe from having any unsupervised contact with the child. The silence that followed was deafening. It was the kind of heavy, suffocating silence that happens right before a massive hurricane makes landfall. Fallon's phone slipped from her hand and clattered loudly onto the linoleum floor. Her jaw dropped. Blythe's face drained of all color, turning a sickening shade of pale gray. She stared at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and sheer terror. "What?" Blythe finally gasped, her voice cracking. "Sutton, what are you doing? This is a sick joke. Tell them this is a misunderstanding." I turned my head slowly and looked my mother dead in the eyes. "I am tough, Blythe. I figure things out. Remember?" Fallon suddenly snapped out of her shock and lunged across the table toward me, her hands curled into claws, screaming at the top of her lungs. "You ungrateful brat! You jealous freak! You are trying to steal my baby!" Mr. Harrison jumped up, shouting for security, while Ms. Sterling calmly slid her chair back out of reach. Two large security guards rushed into the room, grabbing Fallon by the arms and dragging her back. She was thrashing, crying, and spitting venom, her designer coat slipping off her shoulders in the struggle. Blythe was hyperventilating, clutching her chest. "You cannot do this. You have no grounds. We are her family." Ms. Sterling calmly opened the first folder on the table. She slid a printed photograph across the table to Mr. Harrison. It was a photo from Fallon's own public social media account, posted at 2 in the morning on the night Romy was left alone. Fallon was holding a bottle of champagne at the casino, the caption reading, "Living my best life without the dead weight." Then, Ms. Sterling slid the police report regarding Magnus' drug arrest, the fire department's report about the burning microwave, and a heartbreaking transcript of Romy's interview where she talked about her pink survival backpack and her fear of starvation. Finally, she produced the audio recordings of Uncle Dave and Aunt Carol trying to intimidate me into committing fraud against the state. My client has provided overwhelming evidence of severe neglect, endangerment, and a coordinated family effort to defraud Child Protective Services, Ms. Sterling stated coldly. Romy is terrified of her mother. She has been starved, abandoned, and emotionally abused. Sutton is the only stable, safe environment this child has ever known. Mr. Harrison looked at the evidence, his face hardening into a mask of pure disgust. He looked at Fallon, who was still sobbing and struggling against the guards, and then at Blythe, who was shaking violently in her chair. "The temporary placement is denied," Mr. Harrison said firmly. "The child will remain in the emergency care of Sutton Myers pending a full hearing before a family court judge. Miss Myers, your petition for sole custody is officially in the system." I stood up, buttoned my suit jacket, and looked down at the two women who had tormented me for my entire life. They looked small. They looked pathetic. The grand illusion of their power was entirely shattered into a million pieces. I did not gloat. I did not yell. I just picked up my purse, thanked the caseworker, and walked out of the room, leaving them to drown in the mess they had created. But a cornered rat will always try to bite, and Fallon's next move was something I never saw coming. If you think a narcissist will back down after being exposed in a private room, you have never met my sister. Fallon was a cornered animal, and instead of showing a single ounce of remorse, she decided to go on a massive offensive attack. By the time I got home from the CPS office, my phone was blowing up with furious notifications. Fallon had taken her battle to the only arena where she felt she still had power, the internet. She posted a 20-minute crying video on all her social media platforms. She used a specific filter to make herself look pale, exhausted, and victimized. Tears streamed down her face as she spun a web of lies so intricate it was almost impressive in its sickness. She told her followers that she was a victim of a corrupt police department, and worse, that her own sister was a bitter, jealous woman who used her medical credentials to manipulate the state system and kidnap her child. She claimed I had harbored a sick obsession with Romy for years and orchestrated this entire scenario to steal her away because I was jealous of her influencer lifestyle. The internet, being the highly reactive monster that it is, initially took her side. My name was dragged through the digital mud. Strangers were finding my hospital's social media pages, leaving hundreds of comments demanding that I be fired for being a child snatcher. My personal email inbox filled with hateful messages and death threats. Blythe even shared the video on her own page, adding a long caption about how her heart was broken by her treacherous, evil youngest daughter. They wanted a public war. They wanted to ruin my professional reputation and force me to drop the custody case out of sheer public pressure and fear. But they forgot one crucial detail. I was not a terrified 18-year-old anymore. I had nothing to hide, and I possessed all the actual receipts. I did not post a crying video. I did not engage in a screaming match in the comments section. I simply took a digital copy of the public police report detailing the 16 hours Romy was left alone in a dark apartment, the fire department's log regarding the near-fatal microwave fire, and Magnus' arrest record for felony narcotics possession. I carefully redacted Romy's name to protect her privacy, and I sent the entire unedited package anonymously to 3 of the largest local news outlets and a highly popular gossip blog that frequently exposed fake influencers. It took less than 48 hours for the truth to detonate across the internet. The gossip blog ran the story with a massive headline, "Local influencer cries kidnapping after abandoning 6-year-old for casino drug bender." They posted the police logs. They posted screenshots of her deleted casino photos proving she was drinking while her daughter was trapped with a fire. The local news picked it up, verifying the police records and broadcasting the damning story on the primetime evening segment. The public backlash was swift, brutal, and glorious to watch. The exact same internet mob that had attacked me suddenly turned their pitchforks directly on Fallon. Her follower count plummeted by the tens of thousands in a matter of hours. The few companies that sent her free detox teas and cheap clothing publicly dropped her, issuing statements condemning child neglect and severing all ties. Her comment sections were flooded with utter disgust. People were tagging Child Protective Services, demanding she be thrown in a jail cell. Magnus, realizing Fallon was a sinking ship and a massive public liability, dumped her via text message and fled the state to avoid his own impending court dates, leaving her to face the music alone. Fallon was left entirely isolated in her smoke-damaged apartment, facing eviction, public humiliation, and felony endangerment charges, with zero money to hire a criminal defense attorney. Blythe, desperate to regain control, tried to do damage control by calling my hospital to file a fake complaint claiming I was violating patient privacy laws. Cressida, the head nurse who had saved my life 5 years ago, happened to take the call herself. Cressida laughed loudly into the phone, told Blythe she was a disgrace to motherhood, and threatened to call the police for harassment if Blythe ever dared to dial the hospital's number again. I sat in my quiet living room, watching the news segment with a warm cup of tea in my hand. Romy was asleep upstairs, safe and warm in her new bed, oblivious to the storm raging outside. The fortress I had built was holding strong, and the siege my family attempted had ended in their utter destruction. But the final nail in their coffin had to be delivered by a judge. Would the court see through their remaining lies? 3 agonizing months later, we stood in a grand, wood-paneled courtroom for the final custody hearing. The atmosphere was incredibly tense, heavy with the weight of Romy's entire future. I sat beside Miss Sterling at the petitioner's table, wearing a sharp gray suit. Across the aisle sat Fallon, looking gaunt and defeated, wearing a cheap, wrinkled blazer. She was representing herself because she had squandered all her money and could not afford a lawyer. Blythe and Evander sat in the gallery behind her. My father looked 10 years older, his shoulders slumped, staring at the floor tiles. He still could not muster the courage to look me in the eye. Presiding over the case was Judge Lachlan, a seasoned veteran of the family court system known for having zero tolerance for negligent parents and manipulative grandparents. He was a stern man with silver hair and a piercing gaze that made liars sweat through their clothes. The hearing was an absolute massacre. Miss Sterling methodically dismantled every single lie Fallon tried to tell. When Fallon stood up and tearfully claimed she was a dedicated mother who just made one small mistake due to stress, Miss Sterling produced Romy's official school attendance records. The documents showed Fallon had failed to take her daughter to school 42 times in the past academic year. When Blythe took the stand and tried to play the role of the loving, heartbroken grandmother, weeping about how family should always stay together, Miss Sterling cross-examined her beautifully. Miss Sterling forced Blythe to admit, under oath, that her house was not up to code for a child due to hoarding tendencies. She forced Blythe to admit that she knew Magnus was a drug dealer, but allowed Romy to be around him anyway because Magnus bought Fallon expensive gifts. And then, Miss Sterling brought up the bank transfer. She asked Blythe if it was true that she and Evander had drained my entire college fund of $45,000 to pay for Fallon's luxury car while kicking me out into the snow. Blythe stammered, gripping the edges of the witness stand, looking desperately at the judge. That was a private family financial decision. We needed to help Fallon. Sutton was always independent. Judge Lachlan slammed his wooden gavel down so hard it echoed throughout the room, his face flushed with deep anger. Ma'am, you stole your minor child's future to fund the extravagant lifestyle of a woman who leaves her 6-year-old to burn in an apartment while she gambles. Do not speak to me about family decisions in this courtroom. You are describing theft and financial abuse. After reviewing the mountain of evidence, including the harrowing psychological evaluation of Romy, which detailed her severe anxiety, and the existence of the pink survival backpack, Judge Lachlan had heard enough. He folded his hands, looked down from the bench, and delivered his ruling. His words were etched into my memory forever. This court finds Fallon Myers utterly unfit to provide care, safety, or stability for this child, Judge Lachlan stated, his voice booming across the silent room. Furthermore, the court finds the maternal grandparents complicit in creating a toxic, dangerous environment. You have treated this child as a prop, and you have treated your youngest daughter as a disposable financial resource. This court does not protect corruption, and it certainly does not reward abuse. He struck his gavel again. Full legal and physical custody is awarded permanently to Sutton Myers. I am also granting the petitioner's request for a strict restraining order. Fallon and Blythe Myers are forbidden from coming within 500 feet of the child, the petitioner's home, or the petitioner's place of employment. We are adjourned. I let out a shaky breath I felt like I had been holding in my lungs for 5 long years. Miss Sterling squeezed my shoulder, offering a rare, genuine smile. We had won. Romy was mine. She was finally safe. As we walked out of the heavy courtroom doors, Evander was standing alone in the hallway. He looked up at me, tears streaming freely down his wrinkled face. Sutton, he whispered, taking a trembling step forward. Please. I am so sorry. I should have stopped them. I stopped and looked at the man who had turned up the television volume to ignore my crying when I was a desperate 18-year-old girl. The man who signed away my money and watched me walk into a freezing winter night. For the first time in my life, I felt truly nothing for him. No anger, no sadness. Just cold, empty pity. I did not say a single word. I just walked right past him, my heels clicking firmly on the marble floor, leaving him entirely alone in the hallway with the ruins of the family he had so miserably failed to lead. But the universe wasn't done with them yet, and their final downfall was poetic. The true reality of their situation did not hit them until a few months after the trial concluded. The massive legal fees from Fallon's criminal defense regarding the child endangerment felony charges, combined with the total loss of her social media income, had pushed my parents to the brink of financial ruin. Because they had always lived far beyond their means to maintain a fake illusion of wealth to impress their neighbors, they had zero savings left. One evening, as I was walking out of the hospital after a long, exhausting 12-hour shift, the autumn air crisp and biting, I saw a figure standing near my SUV in the dark parking lot. It was Blythe. The restraining order explicitly stated she could not come within 500 feet of me or my workplace, but she had risked arrest just to corner me. She looked terrible. Her once expensive hair was unkempt and graying at the roots, Her designer cashmere coat was missing, replaced by a cheap, thin sweater that offered no protection against the wind. She looked every bit of her actual age, the immense stress having carved deep, permanent lines into her face. I stopped a few feet away, my hand hovering over my phone, ready to dial hospital security at a moment's notice. "Sutton, please don't call the police," she begged, holding her shaking hands up in surrender. "I just need 5 minutes of your time." I crossed my arms, feeling the cold wind whip through the parking lot. "You have exactly 1 minute before I press dial and have you arrested for violating a court order. What do you want?" She swallowed hard, looking at the concrete ground. "We are losing the house, Sutton. Fallon's legal bills wiped us out entirely. The bank is foreclosing next month. Evander's pension is not nearly enough to cover the mortgage arrears. We are drowning." I stared at her, feeling a profound, chilling sense of déjà vu. "And?" I asked, my tone flat. She finally looked up, actual tears welling in her tired eyes. It was real desperation this time, not the fake, manipulative tears she used to control me in the past. "I know I have been a terrible mother. I know I have made horrible mistakes. But we are family. Please. We just need a loan to save the house. Just to get us through the year until Fallon finds a job." "How much?" I asked, my voice terrifyingly calm. She hesitated, her lips trembling, then whispered, $45,000. The universe is a master poet, and its rhymes are brutally perfect. She was standing in the freezing cold, begging the daughter she threw away for the exact amount of money she had stolen from her 5 years prior. I looked at her shivering in the wind. I thought about the nights I slept in my broken-down car, wrapping myself in dirty work uniforms to stay warm. I thought about the agonizing hunger pains that kept me awake. I thought about Romy hiding under her bed with a pink backpack, terrified of the world because of the environment Blythe helped create. I calmly unlocked my car and opened the driver's side door. I looked back at Blythe, who was watching me with pathetic, desperate hope shining in her eyes. "I am not giving you a single cent, Blythe," I said, my voice cutting through the cold air like jagged glass. Her face crumbled, the hope instantly vanishing. "Sutton, please. We will be out on the street. We have nothing left. You cannot do this to us. You have so much money now." I stepped up into my warm, expensive SUV. I rolled the window down just enough to look her in the eye one last time. "You are being dramatic, Blythe," I said, repeating the exact words she had used to dismiss my pain when I was 18. "You and Fallon made some minor financial miscalculations. But you are resilient. You are tough. You will survive. You will figure it out." I rolled the window up tightly, sealing out the sound of her loud sobbing, put the car in drive, and drove out of the hospital parking lot without ever checking my rearview mirror. It has been 7 long years since that freezing night in the hospital parking lot. Today, I am 30 years old, and I am the proud head nurse of the pediatric intensive care unit. The house in the suburbs is no longer just a quiet fortress. It is a home filled with bright light, loud laughter, and an obscene amount of painting supplies scattered across the dining room table. Romy just turned 13. She is a straight-A student, a brilliant artist, and the fierce captain of her middle school swim team. She is confident, outspoken, and incredibly joyful. She never walks on eggshells around me. She never asks permission to open the refrigerator when she is hungry. If she drops a glass in the kitchen, she just rolls her eyes, grabs a broom, and cleans it up while singing along to her favorite music. The fear that once haunted her big brown eyes is entirely gone, replaced by a radiant spark. The faded pink Hello Kitty backpack still exists in our house, but it is no longer an emergency survival bag hidden away under a dusty bed. Romy uses it to carry her swimming goggles, sunscreen, and flip-flops when we go on our annual summer vacation to Hawaii. She does not pack it because she is terrified of being abandoned or starved. She packs it because she is genuinely excited about the beautiful future ahead of her. As for my biological family, I do not know where they are, and I truly do not care to find out. I heard through the extended family grapevine that they officially lost the house to foreclosure. Fallon reportedly had to move to a different state to find cheap housing and work a minimum wage job because her felony record destroyed any chance of a decent career. They are complete strangers to me now. They are just ghosts from a past life that I successfully buried in the dirt. Breaking a generational cycle of abuse is the hardest thing a person can ever do. Sometimes, the world calls you the strong one because they expect you to act like a pack mule, carrying the heavy weight of everyone else's toxic garbage without ever complaining. They weaponize your resilience against you, using your ability to survive as an excuse to keep hurting you. But I learned the hard way that real strength is not about enduring abuse in silence. Real strength is knowing your own profound worth. It is having the immense courage to put that heavy weight down, walk away from the people who are hurting you, and choose your own peace instead. I built my kingdom from the ashes they left me in. And I made sure the walls were high enough and strong enough to protect the one innocent soul they almost destroyed. But I want to know what you think. I walked away and left my mother and sister to drown in the massive debt and legal trouble they created for themselves. I refused to give them the $45,000 to save their home, essentially putting them on the streets just like they did to me. Was I too ruthless? Was it cruel of me to turn my back on them when they were at their absolute lowest, or was it the exact poetic justice they deserved for the years of torment they put me through? I want you to be the jury today. Let me know your verdict in the comments below. Have you ever had to cut off toxic family members to save yourself? Share your story with us. Thank you so much for listening to my journey. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear more incredible true stories about family betrayal, karma, and finding the strength to fight back, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We will see you in the next video. Stay strong.